Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Lessons Learned, the dumbest thing I've ever done with money. My name is Suzanne, and I'm the head coach at G.R.A.C.E Financial Coaching. And my guest today is Luke Andrews. Luke is a real estate entrepreneur who sells, leads, and invests. He is also a best-selling author. Luke has purchased over 40 rental properties before the age of 40, doesn't look a day over 39, and he has a passion for trying to change lives through real estate. Welcome to the show, Luke.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So tell me about your real estate business and how you help people.
Sure. So my real estate business, I kind of have four facets to it. So I am an agent. I do help people buy and sell, primarily working with investors. I also lead a team. So I've got 23 agents who I kind of lead, mentor. It's actually where I've spent the majority of my day today is walking through 2024 business plans with them. So,
it's that time of year. Absolutely.
It is. And so it's kind of taking a look to see how is 2023 wrapping up? What do we want to do differently for 2024? So I've got that aspect. I also, as you mentioned, I have been buying and selling real estate from an investment perspective for my own portfolio for quite a while. So we hit our 40th about 2.5 months before I turned 40. So I got my 40th door right before.
I love it.
And that was about a year and a half ago. So, and then the final aspect is something relatively new that I've been doing. It's an education side to it. So I've, as you mentioned, I've written a couple of books. I was fortunate enough to get one on a bestseller list. I've been doing some online courses trying to help agents and relatively new investors. And then I've been doing quite a bit of speaking. I've been doing some larger keynotes for some real estate teams and some real estate companies, and then been doing some smaller work. I try to go to local high schools about once a month, just to kind of talk through entrepreneurship and financial literacy, things that they're not teaching in school. I didn't learn about how to balance a checkbook, or I didn't learn about what to do the day that you turn 18 and 14 credit card offers come in the mail.
I know. It's just, the financial literacy aspect of, I remember, and I've mentioned this on here before, there was a college prep class that the bad kids in my high school had to take. Ironically, the kids who had to take it were not going to college. It was not aptly named. Yeah. And it taught them about trade schools and vocational schools and how to get an apartment and fill out an application for such things. But for some reason, the kids who were going to college were not encouraged to sign up for it.
Interesting.
Fast forward to when my brother and sister went to high school, that class no longer existed. So now 0% of the graduating classes was getting any information. I actually think there was some tax filing stuff in there as well too. But I was one of the kids going to college, so I didn't have to take it. Isn't that ridiculous?
I know. And these are the skills that we actually need. Trust me, it's nice to be able to conjugate a verb appropriately, but I'm from Kentucky. We don't really worry about that kind of stuff, There's
a lot of verbs that end with IN instead of ING for you guys.
Very, very much so. And one of the crazy things that it blows some of these kids' mind. We talk a lot about compound interest and kind of the difference in, we run the example of someone who starts at the age of 20 and, puts in maybe $1,000 a month until the age of 30 and just stops until they turn 65, versus someone who starts at 30, invests all the way to 65, investing more on a monthly basis.
Yep.
And how they actually have less in the long run.
And how they still don't have as much as the first person, right?
Exactly.
I was able to convince, I had one of my very first clients, this is when, pre-COVID, still meeting everybody in person, asked me to meet with her eldest daughter. She said she wants to go back to school, but she wants to do it all on student loans. Mm-hmm. And they were of an income bracket that the parents were not going to be able to help at all.
Sure.
Zero. And so I met with the daughter and we were at a little place, hip place in San Diego that served coffee and cocktails. And, at 2 p.m. they could start serving alcohol, whatever. And I'm looking over at the counter and I'm going, I should have ordered a drink. I should have ordered a drink. And so I got my coffee in front of me, and for an hour and 15 minutes, I sat there trying to talk her out of this. Do you want to know what? I threw a Hail Mary in the last 5 minutes, and I pulled up on my computer a compound interest calculator. And I did a reverse psychology and said, you seem to not care about paying off this much money in loans. I couldn't get her to care about $110,000. But then I showed her what she'd be missing out on because she'd be paying those loans instead of investing them. And I did like an 8% return, like something like very conservative, like that even if the economy crashed the next day, she would still see more than 8% in her lifetime. And her face just, she got it. She finally got it. It was the opportunity cost of not being able to invest and having to pay $350 a month until she was 50 something that finally got her.
Yeah, and that is how fortunate is she that she had an opportunity to sit down with you, someone who was willing to take an hour and a half and not just give up at the first sign of distress, or sounds like the second or the third or the fourth sign of distress. And then you finally said, all right, let me change my approach a little bit. And that's the one that stuck. How many people don't get that fourth chance and that fourth opportunity, that fourth example that actually changes their mind?
Oh, it's so important. And I'm so glad to hear that you're changing their minds before they're 18. That's huge. Trying. Right.
Listen, I'm just going to toss the info out there. What they choose to do with it is their decision, but it's, it's something that I'm passionate about, and it has been beneficial for me in my life. And I want to make sure that I'm showing that to other people. I actually enjoy, so I've spent time at high schools that are very affluent private schools. I spent time at, schools in very much lower socioeconomic areas. And honestly, I would much prefer to be in the areas that are lower socioeconomics, because that's where I'm comfortable, because that's where I grew up. That's where I lived. And, I tell them, like, hey, just as a heads up, I grew up very poor. I was never in a spot where I didn't know where my next meal was coming from, but there were a lot of times I knew that meal was going to be peanut butter and jelly on stale bread, or, what used to be 7-cent ramen packets, which I think are now 15. I mean, and inflation has doubled the cost there.
I know, it's out of control. What the heck did I buy? Literally this morning, I try to do my grocery shopping on Monday morning when no one else is there. So like 8 a.m. Monday morning. Yeah. I literally picked up something today and I looked at it and I go, this was $7.99 like 6 months ago. And now it's $13.99. I was just like, I just held it in my hand and I was like, what the heck? What is going on? This used to be under $8 and now it's barely under $15.
It's insane. And you can't go anywhere. You can't go to McDonald's or Taco Bell any longer. And, my son and I went to Taco Bell. It was the first time I had been in years. And we drive through and we got a very modest order. And when she said, oh, that'll be $29. And I said, oh, I was like, you must have rang our order up 3 times. And she was like, no. She was like, this gordita here is $6 and this gordita is $6. And I was like, since when?
Oh my gosh. It's crazy. See?
Sorry, Taco Bell is one of your sponsors.
Right. I'm going to go back to my husband and be like, see, this is why we don't eat Taco Bell. That, and it's terrible for you.
You could just beep that part out.
That's all right. I don't think we're up to the Taco Bell sponsorships yet. So I know you mentioned your 40th door. What was your, the very first door you bought?
So I kind of tell that story in 2 parts, because the very first door that I had, my wife and I, we were newly married. We built our first house in 2006 in Denver, right before the crash. And so we came in, we lived in it for a couple of years, and the crash actually for us was not devastating like it was for many. We were very fortunate and very blessed that we both had great jobs and we could afford to sustain it. And that was actually the time when we were starting to grow our family. We were having kids and we needed to upgrade. And so it was significantly cheaper to buy a bigger house at that point. We were at a spot where we could carry both mortgages.
Okay.
And the market was flooded with really good qualified renters who just happened to get in a bad spot with a bad loan. They
Right.
couldn't get a new loan for a new house. And so we were able to kind of keep that first house as a rental. And we kept that for a long time. Even after we moved back to Kentucky, we held on to that for a while. So that was really my first go at the real estate rental game.
Mm-hmm.
But that wasn't, I mean, it doesn't even really count. We had the same tenant for 3.5 years. And
I was going to say, it sounds like it was a good experience. So.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, this is easy. The easy we could take, right? So fast forward a few years, I'm working in a corporate job and I've got a buddy there that I work with. And, the company was very much about health and wellness. So they encourage you to get out with your coworkers and take walks every day. And so we were walking buddies, and we start talking like, hey, we really need to get into these real estate rentals. And there was an up and coming neighborhood in our town where you could still get like a little, what they call a shotgun house, which is just like a small,
long, narrow. Yep. They put
long, narrow
next to each other. Yeah.
800 square feet, 2-bed, 1-bath kind of place. You could find a fixer-upper for like 20 grand.
Holy smokes. This is back in 2006 still?
Yeah, this is kind of, 2014, 15, actually.
Jeez, wow. Okay.
And so we decided like, hey, we're going to go find one of these that needs some work. We're going to pay cash. We're going to do the work ourselves. We're going to fix it up. We're going to rent it. We're going to do all these things. And so we just start looking, and we are talking about it every day. We're looking. And the old Dan Sullivan quote, your eyes only see and your ears only hear what you're looking for. So the more you talk about it, the more you think about it, opportunities kind of present themselves. So he is having dinner at his girlfriend's parents' house, and they have some friends over, and they're asking him like, hey, what do you do? What are you into? And he just gets into, we're into real estate investing. We're trying to get started. This is our plan. And they said, well, interesting. We're into real estate investing. And they said, we have a portfolio here in town. We want to sell our portfolio and retire and move away. So they had 13 doors. Wow. And he said, oh, well, great. Well, shoot me over the details and I'll take a look. There may be 1 or 2 of them that we want to buy. And they said, no, this isn't a buffet. We're not picking and choosing. You can take the whole thing or you take none of it. And so he brings me the deal, and like, it's like, I can tell this is a good deal. Like I was really good at analyzing numbers, and I said, this is a great deal. We just can't afford it.
Right.
But something just kept eating at us. Like, man, we have to get involved. So we had a friend who, he had about 100 doors at the time. And we just were like, hey man, can we pick your brain a little bit? Showed him the deal and like, hey, what would you do in this situation? Who do you know? And he said, well, he was like, if I was in your situation, I'd find somebody like me to partner up with who can help bring half the money, and let's get this thing rolling. Okay, great. That's perfect. Well, we start running numbers, we get the bank involved, and now between the two of us, we only need 50% of the down payment because this guy's going to take the other half.
Yep.
We still didn't have enough for 50% of the down payment.
Yeah.
And it's just like, man, we just kept hitting just roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. And I couldn't get it out of my head. And I kept thinking of outside the box ideas. And I finally came up and I said, hey, we're going to put these into property management, correct? We're going to have a property manager. It's going to charge us 10%. And he said, well, yeah, that's absolutely the plan. And I said, well, what if my buddy and what if we manage it at no cost? We won't charge anything for it. And we'll essentially just manage it on a schedule to pay back what our deficit is to bring to closing. We'll be 50-50 partners from day one. We'll bring what we can, but we will work off that deficit being property managers.
Right. I mean, property, I was a commercial property manager. And so those fees are significantly higher than your real, your residential property managers. But, people who I work with, a lot of times if they're moving, kind of like you said, we have a starter home, now we're moving, blah, blah, blah. They don't realize that a property manager does cost quite a bit of money, especially if you're going to be a long distance landlord. Yeah. So making that concession that you're going to manage these for free, AKA, paying off the debt with your services, that's a lot of money.
It was, but it did two things for us. I mean, one, it got us in the game. I mean,
Right.
it got us into a deal that was a phenomenal deal. And two, it was trial by fire. I mean, we got tossed into these places that had some deferred maintenance, needed some work, some bad tenants. And so, I mean, like we are learning like crazy. This is on the job training that you can't, there's no way to go get a course for this. Nobody can tell you how this is actually going to be. So we just kind of parlayed that into multiple other deals over time.
That's
And so
awesome.
we went from trying to buy one to all of a sudden owning 13.
Right.
And so it was just like, okay, this is
managing 13.
anything.
That's
right.
Yeah.
And managing 13. And oh, by the way, we had no idea what in the world we were doing.
That's amazing. Yeah. I mean, all my training as a commercial real estate manager, I remember, when you go through the eviction process with a commercial tenant, it's similar to a residential tenant, but very rarely do you have to do an eviction on a commercial tenant. It's not very frequent that you get to the stage of the marshal showing up or the sheriff, depending on what jurisdiction you're in, and literally removing property from the tenant space. So in my entire career in commercial real estate, I had to do one of those. One. And I actually had spoken to other property managers who've been doing it way longer than me, and they had never had to do one.
Never done any.
So we all knew what the process was, but going through it is a totally different experience. I mean, the standing there while the guy's drilling the lockout and then rekeying it and handing you the new key and the marshal's unloading everything. There's just certain things that you don't know you're going to have to go through until you're going through them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So that was a good deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
But prior to us starting to record, you mentioned a not so great deal. So Luke, tell our listeners, what is the dumbest thing you'd say you'd ever done with money?
Well, I think the dumbest thing that I've ever done was probably a combination of little decisions that rolled into a big decision.
That's fair.
And so I will tell you the 13 deals that we had there, it ultimately, it did very, very well for us for a while until it didn't. And partnerships started dissolving, and I wasn't as involved as I probably should have been, didn't ask all of the right questions. And the bottom line is we ended up selling the properties it definitely wasn't a loss, but it wasn't anywhere near as much as it probably should have been. Okay. There were some claims made about, doing rollovers into new properties, that would allow us to avoid some capital gains. And it didn't take place the way that it should have. And so we ultimately ended up with a pile of cash with nowhere to put it, nowhere identified on our 1031 exchange. So we ended up paying a boatload of taxes. And so it didn't put me in the financial position that it probably should have. And around that time, I was also in the process of transitioning out of the corporate world into running my own business from a real estate perspective. I had a phenomenal job in the corporate world. It was, the proverbial, the six-figure income with the benefits and the bonuses and running a great team and doing all of these things. But it wasn't quite as lucrative as it seemed from the outside. And I certainly wasn't fulfilled on the inside. Mm-hmm. And so I knew I had a passion for real estate, and my wife was an agent at the time. And during that time, I'm commuting back and forth downtown from my office downtown to the suburbs. And she was just like, hey, if you had your real estate license, you could just stop and show houses for me on your way home, and she wouldn't have to go out during rush hour. And I was, just looking for kind of a new challenge and some things to do. So just as a part-time to help her out, I did get my license, and I instantly fell in love. Like it was just, I was like, how can I do more of this? And so we almost immediately put together a 2-year transition plan of how we transition out of our corporate job into full-time real estate, which was scary for us, both of us being 1099s, no guarantees, no benefits, nothing like that. But that transition, again, going back to your eyes only see and your ears only hear what you're looking for, I was so focused on it. We did it in about 10 months. So
I was literally going to say, I can't believe with how passionate you are that it took you guys 2 years. But there you go. You took the words out of my mouth.
It didn't. Now, what I can tell you for people who have never gone out and started a business like that or done anything like that, the first 6 months are super easy. Like it is just everything is phenomenal, and like you're excited, you're running on adrenaline. Even on the bad days when you're getting kicked in the teeth, you're smiling. It's like I'm doing it. I'm living the entrepreneur dream. Months 7 through 12 get a little harder. Months 13 through 24 are it's just damn hard. Like it is so hard.
Yeah.
And I had some early success. I had some of the money from, when we sold some of our prior real estate stuff. And I just assumed that I would it was an ignorance and an arrogance of like, oh, hey, as soon as I go hang my shingle as a real estate agent, people are going to be coming out of the woodwork, beating down my door, which I had a few in the beginning. And when it slowed up a little bit, I thought, it's just a slow time in the market. I'll be all right. It got real slow, and I didn't do the work that I needed to on the backside. And so we're getting to like months 21, 22, and the money is running out. Like it is like money, the cash is running out, savings are running out, credit is running dry. And, I wasn't 100% transparent with my wife because she's always been like, hey, you're great with numbers. That's something you're passionate about. You kind of handle all of that stuff, which I was happy to do. But I never wanted to let on how bad it actually was. I would, little things like, oh, hey, let's cut back on the spending a little bit. Let's do this. And I certainly never wanted my kids to suffer. Like it wasn't their decision that I left my cushy, comfortable job.
Right.
It was my decision. I'm following my passion. So my family can't suffer because of that. And so I'm just being eaten up inside, and it's getting close to spring break. And, we've got several of our kids' friends are over and their parents are over, and, everybody has a couple of glasses of wine, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, we should all take a trip. We should go get a beach house for spring break. And of course, my wife, my kids, they're like, oh, yeah, that's fantastic. Let's go do that. Let's split it up. And in my mind, I'm thinking, there's no way in the world we can afford this. But I don't want to tell my family. I certainly don't want to tell this house full of people who think everything is going fantastic. And I was like, oh, yeah, that sounds good. Let's think about it. And they're like, no, let's. And they're like getting on their phones right then, and they're casting it to the TV. And we're all looking at houses, and they're like, this one. And they're like, oh, well, we'll just book it and everybody can Venmo us. And I was like, I don't have the cash to Venmo this. Well, then like the light bulb goes off, and I'm like, okay, well, what if I offer, I've got a little bit left on a credit card. What if I offer to pay for it on my credit card, and then everybody can Venmo me? That solves a little bit of my cash issue. Like I don't have to spend any out. I got a little coming in. I can kind of pay it off over time. Dumb decision, by the way. Anybody that turns off the episode right now, don't ever do that. Terrible idea. Don't do it. Fast forward to a month or two later, we're sitting in this gorgeous beach house. And, because we booked it, everybody was like, oh, you guys should get the really nice bedroom, the one that sits up on the top floor. The entire top floor is the bedroom. Like I've got this gorgeous view of the beach. And all I can think about is just like, I'm drowning. And I can't tell anybody, and I'm dying on the inside. And they all want to go out to dinner, and I'm like, I can't really afford dinner. Like I'm worried about like how are we gonna have gas to get
home,
10 hours home. And I just told my wife, I was like, you go, I'm not feeling well, and like I'm just sitting. I broke down. Like I'm just bawling, sitting in this beach house. And like I call it, it's like broken a beach house. And it's like, no one should feel sorry for me whatsoever, because every decision I made up to that point was 100% my fault. But it was like, I didn't know what to do. Like I was lost and had no idea where I was going. And like I said, this is like month 22, 23. And I just praying, just asking, just like, please help. And I remember this mentor that I've had. This guy is absolutely phenomenal. And one of the things that he's always said is don't suffer in silence. So I reach out to this guy and I'm like, I don't really know how to start this. And so I basically just kind of vomit everything out to him. And I'm like, I know more than anything, like I need a coach right now.
Yeah.
I need someone to coach me through because I'm a firm believer in coaching. And I said, I need somebody like you. I said, but I can't afford you. I said, I can't afford anybody. I certainly can't afford you. I said, do you know anybody that is like kind of up and coming in coaching that wouldn't be as expensive, that's willing to take on somebody like me?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, before we do that, he said, why don't we do this? He had like all of these courses. He had this suite of courses that were a total of about $7,000. And he was like, go take my courses. And I was like, I appreciate you, bro, but I definitely can't afford it. Were you not listening? And he said, don't worry about that. I'm calling my assistant now. She's opening it up. You've got access to 100% of it.
Oh.
And I mean, it was just like, it's just started with relief.
Yeah.
And he said, I need you to do one more favor for me. He said, I need you to go outside and take a walk. And I said, no. I was like, I got to get on these courses. Like, I don't have time to burn. And he said, you told me, like, he knew, like, the beach is like that is my happy place. I don't necessarily love the sand. I don't really love the ocean anymore with like sharks and everything else. But like hearing the waves, smelling the salt air, that kind of stuff, like that is just my place.
Yeah.
And he said, get out, go take a walk. He said, the fresh air will do you good. The movement will do you good. The sunshine will do you good. And so we go through and I'm just walking and I picked up so many lessons strictly from that walk.
Wow.
And, I walk past this new construction beach house. This is massive, gorgeous place that is close to being done. And I'm looking at it and they were in there working. And I happened to talk to the foreman of the crew. I'm like, hey, if you don't mind me asking, what's a house like this run? He's like, well, it's going to be about 12 million bucks. I was like, whew. Like, look, like I know we're in different markets and I'm in a very low priced real estate market, but I was like, that's a $2 million house in my market.
Right.
And, I mean, the material's the same, the cost of labor is roughly the same. Obviously the big difference is its location. It's the fact that looking out at the beach, it is that location. And it immediately made me think about, what is my $10 million difference? What is the one thing that I do different and better than everybody else? What is the one thing that I'm passionate about that I can go through? What is my $10 million difference?
Right. What's your location versus everyone else?
Exactly. And it was my passion for pouring into people.
Mm-hmm.
And I immediately went back and just, I stopped thinking about what can I take from everybody else? Because I was in a mode of, all right, what can I sell you? What can I sell you? What can I sell you? Because I just need cash quick.
Right.
And it was just, how can I serve other people?
It gets us, and being a coach and having coached other coaches, you can see and feel when a coach is going through that period of time that you were talking about in your real estate career, because the desperation starts to seep out. Mm-hmm. And it starts to seep out in our conversations. It starts to seep out in our emails. It starts to seep out all over the place, even in social media updates. And so I was going to call it the sophomore slump because the same thing happened to me as a coach. I came out of the box super, super, super hot first 6 months, and then it slowed down dramatically. And you have to know that that's coming, and you have to have the pieces in place to combat that. But if you don't know that, if no one's told you, if you didn't have a mentor, if you didn't have a coach, how are you going to know that? And then you're working from a place of playing catch up versus being proactive and saying, okay, this success, this coming out of the gate and, winning the home run derby my rookie year is not going to last forever. Right.
Exactly.
This is not going to happen every single year. So my question for you then is, to wrap it up for our listeners, what would you have done differently? Or I'm going to add a little caveat here, because you said the little decisions turned into a big thing. Is there anything you could have done?
I could have, I don't want to say adjust expectations, because I don't want it to feel like I'm putting a ceiling on what I'm doing, but I could have understood that there were going to be roadblocks and they wouldn't have been as difficult. I could have had tracking measures in place to see when I was starting to get off the rails. When what I'm considering a, quote, slow period is actually a slow quarter, a slow half of the year, or something like that, because I wasn't tracking it as well as I should have been. I should have 100% not suffered in silence. And I implore that to anyone. If you are struggling with something like that, go talk to somebody. And if you can't find anybody, talk to me. Find me on Instagram, email me. I don't care. Voxer is actually something that I've been doing a lot of here lately.
Oh.
But are you familiar with Voxer?
Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah. So I just tell people, like, hey, send me a voice note and I'll send you a voice note back. Like, I'm not trying to, like, I don't do personal coaching. Like, I coach my team specifically. I don't do personal coaching. I'm not trying to sell you anything. Just send me a note. Like, I'm happy to go through with anybody, because I don't want anybody ever going through that like I did.
Oh man, that is some story. I really, it's just an honor to have you share it with us today, Luke. So thank you for your honesty, for sharing your financial blunders. I know the audience is really going to appreciate this conversation. All of Luke's contact information, should you want to reach out to him, will be in the show notes down below. And I hope you guys will join me next week for another episode of Lessons Learned, the dumbest thing I've ever done with money. Thank you so much, Luke.
Thank you.